My name is Madeline Scott. I'm 31. If you're wondering whether that detail matters, it does. 31 is the age where exhaustion and resolve begin to look the same. The apartment smelled like stale diner coffee and the little lemon of a cleaner. I keep for surfaces that remember other people's lives. I sat by the window with a mug warm between both hands, watching the light split itself across the street like it had somewhere better to be. Marco texted a thumbs-up photo from the stairwell. His back against the brick, his breakfast sandwich half gone. He'd say something steady later. You'll laugh about this. For now, his messages lived in the small, sane folder of my life, the place I went when family became weather. We were supposed to be in Miami that week. A real trip. Beach, empanadas, a rental with a balcony that didn't have a fan rattle when the AC kicked. My mother was excited. She called it a reset. Evan said he needed content. And I built us a spreadsheet because that's what I do. Take human chaos, give it columns, and hope it adds up to tenderness. I paid the Airbnb up front. $3,700 looked obscene on my phone, but reasonable in the ledger, where I recorded the things people promised to reimburse. Send your parts after payday, the family chat read like a chorus of good intentions. At gate D14, I had a neck pillow and optimism I should have left at home. I felt ridiculous bunched in the airport crowd, but the plan had a rhythm. We'd laugh. Mom would retell the same story about when Evan scored drum lessons, and I'd eat someone else's hench of joy like it was validation. The loudness of family, I thought at the time, could still be a kind of home. My phone buzzed. Evan's name slid across the screen with a photo. Two-finger peace sign, champagne blur. No hello, only the image and the caption. Miami's canceled just for you, sis. I read it twice. Laughter rolled across the feed like a wave. Then another message. We're bumping you. First class can't fit 3. The gate agent's voice lowered nearby. People moved like a tide. I stood up, walked to the window where planes looked small and reasonable, and felt my chest pinch in that old, familiar way. Put Mom on, I thought. Put her on, so she can tell me I'm being dramatic. My instincts were a ledger of smaller hurts. I could already see the list. Favors, late-night transfers, the way I had forgiven everything because they called me my rock. But when my mother's voice came through, light and brisk, she sounded 5 years old, and also like the person who could cut budgets with a sentence. Don't be dramatic, she said. We're already on the jet bridge. Her tone didn't ask if I needed anything. It cataloged my obsolescence. Evan's voice had that syrupy smugness I'd learned to spot. Relax. We upgraded. 2 last minute. You can catch another one. He laughed, and the sound was a glass breaking in slow motion behind my ribs. I typed something sensible, the sort of sentence you send when you think facts might matter. I paid for the Airbnb. He answered, lower this time. You booked it under your account. Check-in's yours. Win-win. They waved me off like a busker whose song they liked until a better seat opened. It's funny how some things break your heart, not in an explosion, but in the economy of many small, unpaid transactions. When the call ended, I sat at D14 like a person keeping watch over a wound. Children ran past with sticky hands. A dad knelt and said, Yes, sunshine, of course there's a seat for you. The simplicity of that sentence made something in me ache. I closed my eyes and typed one line into notes. Remember this feeling. I didn't know then that this line would be a hinge. Because the airport was the moment, yes, but the real story starts with the ledger. Growing up, money in my house was never a clear thing. It was a rumor everyone believed in as long as I kept working weekends. I was the one who bought the house on Willow because I had the credit, because I thought if I kept the roof over us, we'd be gentler. I refinanced, signed the dotted line until the pen left a pale dot of ink on my finger. You're my rock, Mom said then. It sounded like gratitude and like a sentence that anchored obligations. Later that sentence became a line item. Evan was the golden child, charismatic, loud in a way that let the world notice him instead of me. He learned early that charm buys a lot of lanes. When I asked for fairness, when I tried to make boundaries, Mom would get the 1,000-yard sigh. Don't punish your brother for not being as lucky. He'd show up with new sneakers, clap me on the back, and joke, I'll pay you back when the app blows up. The app never did. It's easier to laugh and promise than to change. After the airport, something else flickered into being. Small, precise numbers that didn't belong to feelings. That evening, I made coffee and checked my banking app because that is the adult equivalent of looking under the bed. The numbers were wrong. Pending charges stacked across the screen like dominoes. Lounge access, VIP table minimum, rental holds. I stared. Luxury wheels. LLC 319.50s. MIA VIP Lounge Day Pass X2. An authorization blinked in that was larger than a mistake. The card used was the backup debit tied to my phone wallet, the one Evan had added once to book a ride because he forgot his card. I had thought I removed it. I had not. There was a strange quiet between my ears. The world did not explode. It went Arctic. I texted Marco a terse, "Call me." He did, steady and practical. "Block it. Freeze the card. Breathe," he said. He's the one who keeps me anchored when the family makes weather. He was, lovingly, confused about how people who called me my rock were also so willing to stand on it. He suggested reasonable things. I did not need permission to do them, but his voice made the logistics less lonely. I called the fraud number and spoke the magic phrase, "I need to block this device." The bank was efficient and clinical, and I moved like someone who had rehearsed calm, reverse the charges, freeze the card, send a new one overnight. In the background, voicemail chimed. "Mom, you have to approve this. Evan, bro, chill. Authorizations only. PayPal later." The family chat filled with boomerangs of champagne and hearts. I replied with a sarcastic GIF, 10 seconds of petty warmth, and then I did one thing that felt like the first honest choice I'd made in years. I called a realtor. "Hi, I own a single-family home on Willow Street," I said into a quiet line, and the words tasted strange and true. "I'm ready to list today." It was not theater. It was boundary with paperwork. Within hours, a photographer arrived, blinds creaked open to the light, and the house's small, battered corners smelled for the first time like the possibility of being mine in a new way. Evan's shoes were under the bench, 3 pairs like a small claim on the floor. I packed a box, not spite, but reclamation, and moved through rooms that had held arguments like dust and dishes that remembered being paid for in guilt. The realtor texted at 7. Full price cash offer, 14-day close. My heartbeat did not spike. I signed because I was done being the stopgap in other people's plans. When the message from Mom hit my phone, the one that mixed humiliation and command, I listened to it in the dark. "You don't sell a family home without consulting the family," she said. Then, "You don't rob a family member." The old scripts were predictable. They were also suddenly very small against the truth of the ledger I'd been keeping. I spoke with a voice that had been practiced in quiet rooms. "I didn't rob anyone. I'm asking for conditions now. After the storage and 6 months of help, it's on you." They yelled. They shamed me. They performed themselves for other people, and I was the scene they used for emphasis. But under the noise, something new was stitching together. A boundary that sounded like my real name. That night, I sat in the dark with the AC humming like applause, and for the first time in a decade, it felt less like revenge and more like rescue. I'd been the person who kept receipts labeled and envelopes stuffed with someone else's promises. I'd been the one to sign on the dotted line for a house that gave me headaches and gratitude in unequal measure. Selling the house would hurt everyone. It would also stop me from being a standing-by resource. It was terrifying and necessary in equal measure. I typed a single sentence into notes, the same way I had at the gate earlier. "Remember this feeling." Then, because decisions should have edges, I pulled a thread. Not for vengeance, not for spectacle. For the first time in a long while, for myself. When the numbers on my phone started to look like someone else's handwriting, the calm in the room folded inward and left me with a clear, clinical patience. It's odd how practical fury feels. Organized. Almost pleasant. I called the fraud line and read the screen like a tombstone. Merchant names, amounts, timestamps. MIA VIP Lounge Day, Pass X2, blinked like a tiny accusation. Skyar table minimum, 1,080. The card used was the spare tied to my phone wallet, The one Evan added once to grab a ride. Once is how he said it then. Once is what let his world touch mine without asking. Marco sat at my kitchen counter with his elbows on the laminate, face a study in small creases. He can't help the way he steadies me. It's one of the reasons I love him. Block it, he said. Freeze the card. Change passwords. Then eat something. He said eat something because he knows I do transactional bravery on an empty stomach. His practicality was a kind of mercy I hadn't let myself accept in the middle of family storms. I did everything, like someone assembling scaffolding. I talked to the bank, gave them my account numbers in a stream, and heard the phrase that sounds like a blessing. We've got you. They reversed several pending charges and overnighted a new card. I yanked my digital wallet credentials and changed two-factor authentication, like closing windows in a house that had been left unlocked. I set the mortgage auto draft to a separate account that only I control and switched utilities to my email so no one else would get the prompts. Then I did what felt like an escalation only because it broke years of passive tending. I called the realtor I'd met 3 neighborhoods ago when curiosity and exhaustion finally collided. I own the house on Willow Street, I said, and the words were simple and slightly foreign in my mouth. I'm ready to list today. There was a beat, and then the realtor's voice became professional sunlight. She had a photographer within an hour, blinds were opened, and the house started to look like someone else's memory. Photographers have a way of making ordinary light cinematic. The kitchen, which smelled of lemon cleaner and old arguments, suddenly read as updated kitchen in their vocabulary. Evan's shoes, 3 pairs abandoned like small flags of entitlement, waited under the bench. I put them in a box and labeled it, not out of spite, but because I'd grown tired of being a storage unit for someone else's life. Word travels fast when a house appears on the market. Mr. Patel popped his head over the fence and said, "'Bout time, Madeline." His relief was warm and almost embarrassing. He'd been quietly watching for months, and perhaps, in his way, he'd been holding a key I didn't know I needed. I texted Diego, my cousin, who always sidesteps family group theatrics, and he replied with 3 words, "Need a couch? Mine's free." That small, practical solidarity felt like glue. Marco brought me coffee and a plan. You can't let them weaponize your generosity forever, but be ready for fallout. He said it like a weather report, the way he puts caution into predictions rather than pleas. He suggested a storage unit for Mom's things, movers for last Friday, and a calm script in case neighbors called. He also suggested we sleep on the couch the night before the open house because I'd been too keyed to let anyone in while I was still raw. The open house emails came in like small avalanches, requests to show, a potential buyer who wanted to close quickly, and then the line I hadn't expected so soon, full price, cash, 14-day close. I remember signing the acceptance like someone sealing an envelope with intention. It was not revelry. It was closing a chapter with paperwork instead of apologies. Of course, the phone calls and voicemails landed hard the way a storm lands on a porch. Mom's voice first, sharp, then syrupy, then shrill. "Madeline, you can't sell a house without talking to the family," she said. The grammar implied ownership. The tone implied betrayal. Evan followed with performative indignation. "Bro, you're making us look stupid," he said, the casualness of the verb bro, as if that leveled the indignity of history. The family chat filled with boomerangs and hearts, and 100 people who had opinions but little context. They staged themselves across social media like actors in a play where I was supposed to be the villain because I refused to inventory my life into their convenience. Evan posted a story of himself smirking at the lawn with the caption, "House flippers are parasites." I forwarded it to my realtor under the subject line, "Family member may attempt to disrupt showings." She replied, "Noted." Her calm was a tether. Marco suggested we keep a record of everything that seemed performative. Screenshots, timestamps, and any attempts to re-add my card to their devices. The real hurt was quieter and domestic. Mom left a voicemail that went from panic to weaponized shame in 2 breaths. "People are slowing down in their cars to look," she said. "Do you know what people will say?" There it was. Shame as currency. When I answered, my voice was flat. "House is under contract," I said. "Start packing. Storage is paid for 90 days. I could hear the wheels turning in her mind, the calculation of pride against survival. She tried the old button, the maternal guilt that had always worked like a well-wired latch. I'd been her coast for too long to let the mechanism hold. I expected neighbors to gossip. I didn't expect my boss to call and say something that felt like restitution. Nora asked me into her glass office where the sun flattened the city's glass facades into rectangles of light. "We've been reviewing comp adjustments," she told me. "You've been carrying freight." She slid a paper with numbers that finally matched the load I'd been carrying emotionally. Respect in spreadsheet form is a small, concrete mercy, and I sat there and let it find space in me. Later, Liam, my ex, texted, short and pragmatic. "Heard about Miami. I'm glad you chose yourself." We hadn't been together for long after that Tuesday by the sink, where he'd said, "I can't be in a relationship with a committee." He liked clear boundaries on his schedule. He'd said he didn't like emotional calculus. Yet here he was, sending a sentence that felt like a bandage. Overdue, but appreciated. "Thanks," I typed and deleted. There are people who are invoices and people who are people. I didn't feel like resubmitting. Moving day was a slow, banal kind of violence. Boxes wrapped in bubble wrap, Mom arriving late in sunglasses like armor, and Evan filming the whole thing for content he'd title something piercing. "We were blindsided by greed," he said to his phone as the Packers carried out a china set Mom insisted was an heirloom. But that, in my memory, had been handed to me once and silenced with a look. Mom kept her face turned away, a living statue of pride. When the movers left, I taped a new keypad code inside the storm door and left a key in an envelope with a typed note. "Return by Friday. Please coordinate with movers." The instructions were practical and final. The kind of kindness that comes wrapped in terms. She tried the key that night and the lock didn't turn. She rattled it like someone testing whether their life was still theirs. It wasn't the lock that kept her out. It was the fact that I had learned the mathematics of boundaries and that the sum of my kindness had reached an end I couldn't unknow. That night, Marco sat beside me on the couch and rubbed my hand like he was ironing out the creases of a map we were about to use. "You did what you had to do," he said. "Losing people you love from a new vantage is brutal, but boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival." He said it gently, and I let the sentence settle. I had moved from reaction to strategy, from fury to ledger to action. The account I kept had less to do with numbers now and more with what I would no longer allow. Selling the house was not a spectacle. It was an edge. It hurt. It would continue to hurt. But it also made a small, vital space where my life could exist without being someone else's stopgap. I went to bed that night with the sound of the city and the hum of the new lock at peace. Outside, the Willow Street sign swung in the wind like a sentence finalized. The morning after the movers finished, the house felt like a clean slate carved out of old bone. Echoey, unfamiliar, almost too quiet until the pounding on the front door began. It was the kind of knocking that wasn't actually meant to be answered. It was meant to announce control. I didn't move. I stood in the hallway, one hand on the new banister Marco had helped install last month, listening to the fists land on the wood like accusations. "Madeline!" My mother's voice sliced through the air. "Open this door right now. This is still our home." That word again. I waited exactly 10 seconds, long enough for her to hear the silence, to feel that the lock was no longer optional. Then I walked to the door, not to open it, but to speak through the barrier I had every right to put up. "The house is sold," I said calmly. "My name is the only one on the deed. You need to pick up your things from storage before the end of the month." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then, "You ungrateful child! You're abandoning your family for a man? You think you're better than us now? You're embarrassing us." Their voices tripped over each other until they blended into an indistinguishable, frantic choir. A noise that used to control me. Shame braided with obligation, a melody I'd lived under for decades. But through the door, it all sounded strangely small. I turned away and walked into the living room, sunlight warming the floorboards. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain anything. Not this time. Because the moment you start justifying your boundaries, you've already lost them. Eventually, the knocking stopped. The yelling dissolved. Tires crunched down the driveway. Silence returned. This time, feeling like freedom, not emptiness. The family group chat erupted. My phone buzzed like it was trying to vibrate through the table. I didn't check it until after coffee. When I opened the chat, chaos awaited. Aunt Mariella. Your mother is in tears. You are tearing this family apart. Tio Ramon. Selling the house without consulting your elders is disrespectful, Cousin Lila. You're letting some boyfriend dictate your life, Grandma. La familia viene primero, mija. Family comes first, my daughter. Evan. Bro, you really locked us out? Pathetic. That was the one that made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because I had finally reached the point where his words held no weight. Marco, sitting at my dining table with his laptop open, glanced up. The circus start already? You have no idea, I said. He reached over, squeezed my hand once, and went back to typing. I left the group chat without a word. 10 seconds later, my mother called. I declined. She called again. Declined. 3 more times. Declined. Finally, a voicemail came in, long, dramatic, shaking with theatrical rage. You think you can just leave us? After everything we did for you? You will regret this. You'll come crawling back. One day you'll need us. I played it twice, then saved it. Documentation was my new language, the turning point. That evening, I drove back to Willow Street one last time to sign a final round of paperwork. The sun was setting behind the maple trees, the light turning gold, beautiful in a way that made the moment feel cinematic. The buyers were already there, admiring the yard. A quiet couple, mid-40s, polite. They walked through the home with a kind of reverence I had never seen my own family give it. They noticed details I had forgotten I once loved. Beautiful crown molding. Original hardwood, rare these days. This room gets amazing light. For the first time, the house felt appreciated instead of drained. After the papers were signed, the realtor gave me a long, knowing look. You know, she said, most people who sell under family pressure look defeated. But you look like someone who chose herself. I didn't know I needed to hear that until she said it. Driving away, I didn't check the rearview mirror once. Not for the house, not for who used to live in it, not for who I used to be. The family's final move. 2 days later, they made their last attempt at control. My mother showed up at my work. Reception called up, voice tight. Madeline, your mother is downstairs. She says it's an emergency. Of course she did. Nora, my boss, overheard and gave me a reassuring nod. Take your time, and if she causes a scene, I'll have security escort her out. That sentence alone felt like a lifetime of validation. I went downstairs. My mother stood in the lobby, eyes red, makeup smudged, clutching a stack of papers like they were battle weapons. Explain this to me. She shoved the closing documents toward me. You really did it. You really sold the house. Yes, I said, because it's mine, and because I had to. Her face twisted, not with sadness, but with the realization that her control had run out. You're not my daughter anymore. I let the words land. I didn't correct her. I didn't defend myself. I didn't apologize. I simply said, I hope one day you understand that I didn't leave the family. I left the treatment. Then I walked away before she could reload her guilt. Security stood nearby in case she escalated. She didn't. She just stared after me, stunned, as if she'd watched a door close and finally understood she couldn't reopen it. That night, Marco made dinner. Something simple. Roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, herbs. He played music softly, nothing emotional, just warm, grounding sound. I sat with a plate in front of me, not touching the food yet, just breathing. Marco leaned on the counter, arms crossed. You did it, he said gently. You really did it. I'm scared, I admitted, but I'm relieved too, like I can finally hear myself again. He nodded. Relief is usually what real freedom feels like at first. I let myself believe him. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars, lights, wind. But inside, for the first time in my adult life, everything was still. Everything was mine.